In this video, we will be learning how to load the Christmas Advent houses and prepare them to cut in Silhouette Studio. I am working in the Business Edition using the SVG files. At the end of this video, we will cover using the Dxf file to load the Christmas Advent houses into the basic or free version of Silhouette Studio. There are two versions of the SVG files for you to use. The houses are saved all in one file as an SVG, or you can load them into the software one at a time, also as an SVG. Let's get started with loading all 24 houses at once. Here we are in Silhouette Studio Business Edition. If you are working in the Designer Edition, you should be able to figure out how to load and prepare these files to cut by watching this tutorial as well. If you are working, again, in the Basic Edition of Silhouette Studio, I will cover how to load the Dxf files towards the end of this video. We're going to start by going and opening the file. So we're going to choose File, then Open. And we're going to start with all 24 houses in one file. So it's the Christmas Advent houses 1 through 24. This is going to take a minute to load because it's such a large file. These houses are designed to cut on 8.5 by 11 65-pound cardstock. They're designed to fit nicely on the 8.5 by 11 paper. If you should choose to want to make the houses slightly larger and cut them on 12 by 12 cardstock, you can do that, but you would want to enlarge them all at once when the entire house is grouped together. Once you load all of the files together in Silhouette Studio, you will see that it's quite a large file. This is how it comes in. I'm going to zoom out so you can see them all. So these are all 24 houses here. At this point, you'll click on the house and zoom in. And you can see that my page setup size is set to 8.5 by 11. If yours does not look like this, you can go over here to the Open Page Setup panel on the upper right bar and click on that. And you can change the width to, actually this is set up for 8 by 10.5, but you can change this here to 8.5 by 11. And that changes the actual size of your page to match the size of your cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and close that. So now you can see that this house is fitting nicely on an 8.5 by 11 size sheet of paper. You can leave the house this size, or you can ensure that the entire house is selected by clicking and rubber band selecting over it. And then you can enlarge the house to fit the paper by just dragging it slightly, the corner of your bounding box slightly outward. And it will resize the house, both height and width, the way that it's supposed to be. So there are a few changes that we need to make to this house, and I've set it up so that it should be relatively easy to do. We're going to go over here on the right side where our toolbar is, and we're going to go all the way down to the bottom, and we are going to click on the Open Layers panel. If you can't see this icon, it's kind of like two diamonds, one right over the other. You can click on this little arrow, this green arrow, and it will show you other options, and it should be under here. But for now, we're going to click on that Open the Layers panel, and we're going to get this box that's going to show each house, and they're all going to come up at once. So you can see house 1, house 2, and so on going down. If you click on the plus sign next to the house, you're going to see that there are categories under each house. In this first house, the church, there is also a wreath category. You will not see this on any other house. I put it in the first one. But every other house will have a draw lines category, which is for the pen, a score lines category, which is for your fold lines, and a cut lines category underneath that. So getting started here, just to kind of show you and give you that example, we're going to go over to the Send panel. Now, before you go to the sun panel, you want to look over your document and make sure that it is completely on the canvas. And see, this house here is on my canvas a little bit. I'm going to move it over so that it's not on the white part of my mat. I'll go ahead and select that. I'm going to go ahead and choose send. Now, working here in the send menu, you show that everything kind of shows up in red as cut. And we don't want that. We want to just set certain items to pen and certain items to score and then other items to cut. So I'm going to show you how to do that. There's a menu bar here in the send menu. There's simple, line, fill, and layer. If you click on the layer portion of this, you're going to see all the layers now in each of these houses. It's starting with house 24 in here, but we actually have house 1 up. The houses came in starting with house 1, and you can tell which house you're working on because the number's right on it, right here. So we're working in house 1. So we want to deselect all the other houses. So what we're going to do is we want to uncheck this box up here at the top so that everything gets deselected, and that's what we want to happen. And now we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to start with house 1. So here it is, house 1, and we're going to start with the wreath. This is only on the first house. We'll select the wreath only, and that highlights here just the wreath. And then what we're going to do is we are working on cardstock heavy, 80 pound. I'm actually using this setting, but I'm using on my cutting mat 65 pound cardstock. I just find it works better. There's a lot of little windows in each of these files, and we want to make sure it cuts all the way through and we don't have any trouble. So I'm choosing this setting. Under Action, you want to choose Sketch, and then under Tool, you want to choose Pen, okay? So now only this is set to write in pen on your cardstock. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to load my cardstock onto a 12 by 12 mat. I'm going to load 8.5 by 11 cardstock. I'm going to load it into my machine, and then I'm going to load my pen tool into the blue holder on my machine. I am working on a Silhouette Cameo 4. If you are working on a different Silhouette machine, you will have to look up how to use your actual pen tool on the machine. I'm just trying to teach you how to prepare the files to create them. So you'll need to load your pen, whatever color you're using, into the blue tool on your machine and load it into cartridge. It's cartridge 1. You want to put it in the number 1 slot on your machine if you're using a Cameo 4. So hey guys, I wanted to show you real quick. I'm using 8.5 by 11 65 pound cardstock on a Silhouette cutting mat. This mat is used, and so it's not as sticky, but if you're using a brand new mat, you're going to want to use a light grip mat. At this point, you're going to want to use your brayer and press down the cardstock so that it's fixed nicely to the mat before you start cutting. Here is my mat loaded into my machine, and I'm going to zoom in over here and show you. Here is my pen tool in cartridge 1 inside the blue casing, ready to print the wreath. So this is how that's done. Coming up, we're going to be needing to use our auto blade, and then also I'll be changing the pen lines around the windows and doors. I like to do them in a gray color. So we'll be doing the red pen, then we're going to be switching to the gray pen, then we're going to be switching to the auto blade to score, and then the auto blade to cut. And all of these tools are going to be going into cartridge 1. Also, I wanted to give you guys a quick tip on this because I noticed that when I just leave my mat hang down, like downward on the counter, that the pen tool actually kind of rakes across my cardstock and messes things up. So the solution that I found to this is to take a few packs of cardstock or something that is going to hold this mat level so that when the pen tool is going around on your cardstock, it's not, when the cardstock rolls in and out and it's on an angle, it has a tendency to catch the tip of the pen. So if you're holding your paper level with, you know, something underneath it, what I've done is just put 3 packs of cardstock that I had on hand right here handy I just tucked them under there so that my mat is nice and flat going into the machine. That way when the machine moves the tool away, it's not going to rake the pen along the actual surface of this cardstock. I'll show you an example of that here in a second. So here is an example of how the pen raked this piece of cardstock. You can see my wreath up here, but you can see the pen, as it was going back to the main hub, pulled along the cardstock and left a mark there, and we don't want that. So that's where I think it's very important to level out your mat by putting something underneath it, something smooth, so it's not catching as it's pulling in and out, but it just brings this mat up level with the machine so that that pen mark is not happening. So my wreath is finished writing with the pen tool, and now we're going to go ahead and switch out to the next color. So here we're going to come over here, and just so I can show you how to do this, you're going to take this little tool, you pull it straight out, and then you lift this little cartridge up and out, and then you can see your tool, your pen is inside this tool. Sorry, I moved the camera down for you. There's a little nubby here on the side. You pull that up, and your pen tool comes out. Okay, then we're going to put the gray pen inside this tool next for printing, for doing our gray lines. So we're going to take the gray tool and we're going to set it inside. There's a little notch right here that you need to line up with your pen, and then you're going to take it and you're going to stamp it closed. Okay, and then the metal piece on the back is going to go towards the back of cartridge 1. You're going to set it in there all the way down. Make sure it's pressed all the way down, and then push in the button. And now it's ready to go with our next color. I'll show you that in a second. So what we're going to do is we're still going to be on auto, we're still going to be on sketch, but we're going to change the pen color to whatever we want to outline our windows and doors with. I am using a light gray pen, but you can use your own creativity and use any color pen you want. So once this is selected, make sure you're still on cardstock, auto sketch under action. There's little drop down menus here, so you auto sketch, and then under your tool you're going to do auto pen is fine. And then we're ready to go, and we're going to hit send. Now we want to make sure that the right color pen is loaded into the cartridge in our machine before we hit send. You never want to unload your paper until you're completely done with the house that you're working on. So we're going to hit send. So I wanted to show you here the pen lines for the windows and doors have been drawn on the cardstock. And now we're going to go over here and we're going to open up tool 1 and we're going to lift that pen out of there. And we're going to replace it with our auto blade so that we can do the score lines. Get those going. So we're going to push the auto blade all the way down in there, and then we're going to close it. And here's our paper ready to go. Notice we never unload the cardstock from the machine. We don't want to do that until we're completely done with the house. So we're done making the pen lines around the windows and the doors, and we are going to deselect the draw lines. And now we are going to work on the score lines for the house. So we are going to select the score lines. Again, just so you know how this is working, we are working under house 1, cut lines, score lines, draw lines, pen lines. You see that? And then up here you see house 2, cut lines, score lines, draw lines. Okay, so that's how these are set up, and you'll work your way through one house at a time. So again, here we are. We're only going to be working on the score lines. So we select that. You can see over here that only the score lines are showing up on your mat. You're going to come over here to your action. You're going to click the drop down menu and you're going to choose score. And you're also going to want to have the auto blade selected here under tool. And so now we're going to go ahead and send the score lines. So here's a quick snippet of the score lines being... Okay, so our machine is done cutting out all the score lines, and we are going to come over here and we're going to deselect the score lines, and they disappear over here on your mat. And then we're going to select the church cut lines. And now you can see only the areas that we want to cut through show up. We're going to make sure that our material is still set to cardstock, heavy, 80 pound. We're going to make sure that this is set to cut, which it is. It's using the auto blade. And again, that tool is the auto blade. Now, here's where I find that a small change needs to be made. In order to cut through the cardstock, I feel like we need to change our cut depth on our blade. So I have changed only for the cut lines. I have changed the tool to a 5, the force as 33. It's working for one pass on mine, and I just went ahead and left the speed at 4. And so now we are ready to go ahead and cut out the church. This is the last step for the first house. So our first house is completely done. I haven't unloaded it from the machine yet, but I want to zoom in and kind of show you what has happened here, just so you could see it. So it has cut all around, but you still see the pen lines, and this is ready to go. You can see the windows cut in the church, and there's the pen lines kind of surrounding the doors and the windows. You kind of follow this up just to kind of give you a look at this completed file. We will head over to assembly next, but this is a great example. You can see the cut line around the steeple, but you can also see those dash cuts, which are the score lines for the steeple. And then over here around the window, those are the draw lines. So I'm just kind of showing you the different steps we went through here and how it looks. So now that everything is complete, we'll go ahead and unload this from our machine. So now we're all done with the first house, and we have gone through the process of creating the wreath pen lines, creating the church draw lines, which are also pen lines, creating the church score lines, and we just finished the last process for this first house, which was creating the cut lines for the church. We can now deselect that, and you have two choices at this stage of the game. You can highlight the entire first house and drag it off of your canvas, and then you can scroll over slightly and highlight the entire second house and then drag that onto the canvas. And then we can just come over here under the panel where house 2 is, see house 2, and then you have house 2 cut lines, house 2 score lines, house 2 draw lines. So we're going to start with house 2's draw lines, and there they show up. We want to make sure our pen is loaded into the blue cartridge and loaded into the first holder in the machine. And then we want to load our 8.5 by 11 cardstock onto a 12 by 12 mat. And you want to secure it with a brayer. And then you want to load that mat into your machine. And then you want to come over here and we're going to choose Sketch. And then we're going to choose Pen. And then we can select Send. And we'll continue to work through this process. The next step would be to deselect the pen lines and choose the score lines. And you can see the dashes show up here on our mat. Over here, we are going to select the drop-down menu under Action and choose Score. And we are still using the auto blade. So at this point we can hit Send. And then the third action would be the cut lines. So we're on house 2 and we're doing the cut lines. And when you select that box only, the cut lines show up on your mat. You can come over here, make sure that we have auto cut selected under Action, the auto blade selected under Tool. We're going to increase the pressure to 5 for your blade. and the force to 33. Speed 4 is fine, and 1 pass is good. And then we're going to click send, and that will complete house 2. So this is how we would work through each step, each house, if they're all bundled together. If you want to quickly create these houses, this is the best way to do it. They're also saved separately, one house at a time. If you wanted to, say, spread this out over 24 days and you only want to load one house at a time, it's less confusing and it's simpler that way. So this is how you would work through it. The other thing you may want to do, this is one way to switch, from house to house in the cut menu, but you can also pop out here to your design panel. And if you hit the Control- key, you can zoom out and see all the houses. So this is another way to work through them and move them around and, work through the houses one at a time. You could, highlight, rubber band, select the entire house, drag it off of your mat, and then, choose house 3, and then drag that one onto your mat. And then you can go over to your send menu. Under the design menu here, you want to make sure your page setup is 8.5 by 11. We did that earlier in the video, but mine got changed because I ended up closing the file and reopening it. So there, when you set it to 8.5 by 11, your page size, your width, and your height, all of these houses will fit on an 8.5 by 11 page. So at this point, you could go to the send menu. You are working on house 3. You can tell that by the number. You can come over here. Again, you find this layers panel up here. It's simple line, fill, then layer. And then you're working on house 3 because you can see it right here on the mat. You come over here and you see house 3, and you're going to always start with your pen lines. Go pen lines, change your action and your tool, then go score lines, change your action and your tool, then go cut lines. Make sure your action and tool are set properly, and only under cut lines you're going to want to increase your blade to 5 and your force to 33. So I think we've walked through this enough for you guys to get the hang of how to work through cutting each of these houses. Now we're going to cover bringing in one house at a time. So you're going to have Silhouette Studio open, and then you're going to choose File, Open. You're going to select the house. This is just house 1. They'll be numbered, house 1, house 2, house 3. So here, now you only have one house open on your canvas at a time. You want to make sure, again, that your page size is set to 8.5 by 11. And then you can head over to the send menu. When you are in the send menu, you can go to the layer panel up here at the top. It says simple line, fill, and layer. And you're going to want to go all the way to the top. It doesn't show unless you click this little icon over here and drag it up. And then you'll see this tool number, and there's a checkbox. If you check that, everything deselects, and that's what you want. Then you're going to scroll all the way. You can drag this little icon over here on the right and go all the way to the bottom. And you can see here in the layers panel it says house 1. And you can start with your pen lines. So you're going to go pen lines, draw lines. I'm sorry, yes. The very first house has a wreath in it. So it'll be wreath pen lines, then church draw lines, which are also pen lines, then score lines, then cut lines. So here we are. We have this one house on the canvas. We know that we're working on house 1 because it shows over here on the canvas. We're going to scroll down on this panel, this layers panel, until we get to house 1, and then we're going to want to check the box. We'll start here with the pen line, and that's going to highlight only the item that you're working on. At this point, you're going to want to load your pen into the blue tool onto your machine and put it in cartridge 1. And you're going to want to load the pen color that you want your wreath to be. And you're going to come over here. You're going to want to make sure you're working on cardstock, 80 pound. And your action is going to be sketch. And your tool is going to be pen. You want to load your pen tool into the machine and go ahead and hit and make sure your cardstock is on your 12 by 12 cutting mat and load it into the machine, and then you're going to want to click send. Then when you're done with that, you want to turn off the wreath pen lines and you want to turn on the church draw lines. And the church draw lines are also pen lines. They are a perimeter accent line around the windows and doors on the buildings. So if you select only that, you'll see that only pops up over here on your mat. You want to go down here and make sure your material is set to cardstock heavy, 80 pound. Your action is going to be sketch. Your tool is going to be pen. At this point, you want to load your cardstock onto a 12 by 12 mat. I would secure the 8.5 by 11 65 pound cardstock onto the mat with a brayer and then load that mat into your machine. Make sure the color pen that you want to outline your windows and doors with is also loaded into the pen holder into tool 1 on your machine, and then you can click send. The third step is to deselect those, and we are going to create the score lines. So we're going to check the score line box. Then under here, we're going to make sure the material says cardstock heavy, 80 pound. Our action is going to be score. Our tool is going to be the auto blade. Once you have selected score and auto blade, you're going to go ahead and make sure that your auto blade is loaded in under tool 1 on your machine, and your cardstock should already be loaded from the pen lines. You never want to unload it until you've completed with the entire house, and then you want to click send. The next step is to deselect the score lines and select the church cut lines. And now all that shows up over here on your mat is the cut lines. You want it to still say cardstock 80 pound heavy. Your action is going to be cut. Your tool is going to be auto blade. And I have found that the best setting for my cardstock is to set the blade at 5 and the force at 33. 1 pass speed 4. Make sure your tool is changed to the auto blade. You've swapped out the pen and now you've placed the auto blade in tool 1, and then click send, and it will cut your cut lines. At this point, this house is done and you can close the file and at a later point open up house 2. Now we're going to go over how to load the Dxf file into Silhouette Studio Basic Edition. This is the unpaid version of the software that comes with your machine. I am working in the Business Edition, but these are the same steps you would follow if you were loading the Dxf file into the software. So we're going to open up Silhouette Studio, then we're going to go to File, Open. You need to find where you saved the file to on your computer, and you can see over here the file type is Dxf File. It says Christmas Advent Houses 1 through 24. That's the file you're looking for. You're going to click on it so it's highlighted blue and then click OK. It's going to take a little time to load because it's a very large file, And I will say this, I highly recommend upgrading to the Designer Edition or the Business Edition. This is much more difficult to work with. It's very doable, but it's so worth, you know, the minimal amount of money to upgrade your software, and you get so many features with the Designer and Business Edition. Even the Designer Edition is just excellent. So that's my encouragement to you. But I'm going to show you this because I know many of you don't have the upgraded version and are going to be looking to create this village. It's going to be a little more complicated because of the type of file you're using. Here's what the Dxf file looks like when it loads into your software. It comes in a little bit disoriented, out in the gray area of the machine. It does appear to be sized correctly. What we're going to want to do is make sure that our page size is set to 8.5 by 11. You can get to the page setup panel over here in the top right, or wherever your page setup is in your software. But once you open page setup, you'll change the width to 8.5 by 11 and the height to, you'll change the width to 8.5 and the height to 11. And we can close the page setup. Now, to view this file, there are 24 houses here connected together. We are going to want to hit Control minus on our keyboard, and it is going to zoom out. Alternatively, I believe you can hit the plus and the minus up on the top of your, up here at the top toolbar. There's a magnifying glass with a plus and a minus, and that allows you to see everything around your mat. So you can see that this file came in, just slapped it in there somewhere. So what we're going to want to do is click on the gray area, rubber band select, and drag over this entire file because it is not grouped together. Alternatively, you can hit Control A, and that is a select all feature. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can see I'm going to click off of it, and then I'm going to hit Control A, and it's going to select the whole file. At this point, we're going to drag it down so that just the first house is on our mat. And now we can zoom back in. So we can hit the plus sign or Control plus on our keyboard. And you can see that this is the file here. So it's going to be a little more work working with the Dxf file, but it can be done. So now that we just have the first house on our canvas, we're going to click off of it, and we're going to have to work through each of these layers to set them correctly. So the first step we're going to do is to group these items together appropriately. And you're going to want to be zoomed in as much as possible to do this. So these dash lines are score lines. So you're going to select all of the dash lines holding your shift key down. So you select the first one, hold your shift key down, and then select the next one. There's one here, one here. Take your time with this to make sure you get all the right lines together. This one, so I'm going to quickly go through these. And you can tell that you've selected them because a little box forms around the score lines themselves so that you know. And then there's one score line down here on the bottom for the roof. Now that they're all selected, we're going to hit Control G, and that's going to group all our score lines together. In order to check this, you can grab them and drag them off of your canvas, and you'll see you can look at this now and make sure that you only have score lines over here. And then if you look here at your church, you don't see any score lines left behind. You know you got it right. Now don't try to reposition that. Just hit Control Z, which will undo that and put it right back where it belongs. So Control Z. I have to do that twice because I moved. Actually, I'm doing it 3 times. And then see, it bounces back into place on your canvas. Now, the next thing we need to do is connect our draw lines together, the pen lines. So we're going to select these areas, select the first one, and then hold your shift key down and select all of these draw lines on your canvas. These are the lines that are going to be around the windows and doors. And that's all of them. So we're gonna hit Control G to group them. I believe if you right click, you can also, with your mouse right click, you can group and ungroup things that way as well. I like to use the keyboard shortcuts. Control G does it. So then if you click on one of those and then drag them off, you can see that you got them all. And then you can look at your canvas here to make sure that you didn't leave anything behind and it looks good. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that and put them back where they belong. And then there's one other area over here that we need to, well, we need to connect our cut lines to, but the wreath, and this is only on the first house, the wreath also has cut lines and score lines. So we could click over here and then we could Control plus. Actually, it didn't work. You can hold your space bar down. If you push in your space bar, you see my mouse turns into a hand. So hold your space bar down and then you can click with your mouse and drag and it will move you around the canvas. So once you let go of the space bar, it turns back into an arrow. Then you can click and drag over this entire wreath and then hold your Shift key down and deselect the cut lines. Okay, so you can see the wreath is in the middle, it's one color, and then these cut lines on the outside are another color. When you deselect them, that means only the draw lines inside the wreath are chosen. Then you can choose Control G, and it's going to group those together. And you can check again by dragging it off, and you can see that I got that right. You can choose Control Z, and it puts the wreath back into place. Now we want to attach these cut lines. This is the outer edge, and hold your Shift key down, the inside edge. And then do Control G, and those are now connected together as well. You can see that. Now do Control Z. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command, and that puts it back where it needs to go. Now we can hit Control minus, and we're going to zoom out of our canvas, and we're going to go ahead and choose the cut lines and group those together. So the cut lines are the solid lines, so it's going to be the outside of the house, and then we're going to hold our Shift key down. You're going to have this little rectangle here and all these little windows. See, I chose that. You don't want to do that. You want to choose all these individual little windows now. Another option, we're at this point, I'm actually going to show you an easier way to do that. At this point, we have grouped together the score lines. We've grouped together the pen lines. So what we could do at this point is highlight the entire canvas, hold your Shift key down, and you can deselect the score lines all at once. So just get really, make sure you're right on them and hold your Shift key down and deselect the score line. And then you can also deselect those pen lines. So now let me look here closely. Now the other thing you want to deselect is the pen lines on the wreath. And I think that will do it. So all we're left with now are the cut lines. And we're going to do Control G, which is going to group those cut lines together. And then we can check and make sure we did that right by dragging the cut lines off. And you can see it looks like we did it right. These are all pen lines that surround the doors and the windows. The pen line for the wreath is left behind, and all the score lines are left behind. And then as we look over here, these all look correct. This is how it should look. So if you hit Control Z, it's going to put that back into place. We are ready to send this now to cut. So we're going to go over to the Send menu, and I like to just deselect everything at once. So I drag over everything on the canvas, and I choose No Cut, and that gets rid of everything. And then we can bring them back one at a time. So the order I create these in is pen line, score line, cut line. So I always work with the pen lines first. So we're going to click on one of the pen lines, and that's going to select everything because we grouped them together. And then we can come over here into our material action tool. So the material is going to be cardstock, heavy, 80 pound. Our action is going to be sketch. And then our tool is going to be pen. And now we're going to choose sketch, and everything showed up. I must have deselected them. So what we can do again is just highlight them all, choose no sketch, and then just select, click off of it. That's what I'm doing wrong. Click off, and then come back and just select the perimeter of one of the windows and doors, and now choose sketch. And see, so those are the only thing that showed up. So this is just a perimeter line around the windows and doors to kind of add a little detail. You can add in whatever color pen you want into your machine to draw these. So at this point, you're going to want to load 65-pound cardstock on your 12 by 12 cut mat, load that into your machine, and then under tool 1 or however you work on your machine, different machines work differently, you're going to need to load your pen tool into your machine. I am working on a Cameo 4, so I am loading a pen into the blue casing and loading the casing into tool 1. At that point, you're going to come over here. You're going to make sure sketch, you went through all these steps correctly. So it's sketch, only your pen lines are selected. You have your cardstock material, your action is set to sketch, your tool is set on pen, and your cardstock and your pen tool are loaded into your machine, and you're going to click send down here at the bottom. When that action is done, you're going to come back over here and you're going to click on the pen lines again, and then you're going to choose no sketch, click off of them, then click back on them, then choose no sketch. I don't know why it's not working. So I'm just going to try and highlight the whole canvas. We'll try it that way. And then choose no sketch. There we go. Now they disappeared. Now there's one other pen line, and that's the one in the wreath. I set it up separately so that we could change the pen color. So you deselect the canvas so that all the selections disappear, and then come over here and select just the middle of the wreath. Now you can come over here, make sure again it says material cardstock, your action is sketch, your tool is pen, and with that pen line only selected, choose sketch. And now just your wreath pen lines show up. So again, leaving the cardstock loaded into the machine, changing out your pen color, then you're going to want to hit send. At this point, we're going to want to, again, highlight everything, choose no sketch, so that disappears, click off of the canvas, and now we're going to do the score lines. So we're going to come over here to material is still cardstock and it's still loaded in our machine. We do not ever unload it until we're done with each house. Action is going to be score, and I am using the auto blade on my machine. So now we can come over here and we're going to choose one of the score lines, and that should highlight them all because we grouped them together, and we're going to choose score. And there are all of our score lines. So we have our auto blade set in the machine, our action is set to score, our cardstock is loaded in there, we've selected the lines and they're set to score, and then we're going to go ahead and click send. At this point we want to highlight everything, choose no score, deselect by clicking off of the canvas, and now we're going to select the cut line. So we're going to come over here to action, choose cut. We're still working with the auto blade. We're going to come over here to the canvas and select one of the cut lines. Again, they're grouped together, so that will select all of them. And we're going to choose cut. And you can see that all of the cut lines only have showed up on the canvas. Now here is the one change for the cutting step, is we want to increase our blade to the depth of 5. We want our force to be 33, and the speed can be 4. That's fine. Now we want to make sure that the auto blade is loaded in the machine, which it should be from the previous scoring. And obviously our cardstock is still loaded in the machine. We never unloaded it. And now we can click send. And that takes you through all the steps for one house. At this point in time, you could highlight this entire canvas again. Choose no cut. Then we're going to go back out to the design window, and we want to make sure that everything on that canvas is selected because it's not grouped together. And we're going to drag it off of the canvas. And then at this point, we're going to highlight everything for house 2. We're going to drag that onto the canvas. And we're going to work through these again, pen line, score line, cut line. We're going to group them together in that fashion. So let's start with the pen lines. They are the ones that surround the windows and doors. There's not that many on this house. We're going to hold our shift key down, and then all of these on this particular roof are pen lines. So what might be fastest on this one is just to highlight everything there, deselect the score line only, and deselect the cut line. And now we've got the pen lines. And then we're going to do this pen line around this window, this pen line around this window, this pen line, and this pen line. And we're going to do Control G for grouping. And then I'm going to just check it by selecting the pen and dragging it and seeing if that we got them all. And we did. So we hit Control Z and that goes back. Next up, we're going to do the score lines. So we're just going to have to individually select them, holding the shift key down. We're going to select all the score lines. There it is. And then this one down here in the middle. And we're going to Control G. And then we're going to drag them off to make sure that we got everything. And now look, see, we missed this score line. And this is why it's important to do this. So hit Control Z, which puts them back into place. Hold your shift key down and add that score line. Hit Control G again. And now we've got them all together. That's why it's so important to move them off, just to make sure that you've gotten it right. Hit Control Z, they'll go back into place. And now we've done our pen lines, we've done our score lines. We can highlight the whole project, hold our shift key down, deselect one of the score lines, then deselect one of the pen lines, and then that should leave only the cut lines left. So we can Control G. That's going to group the cut lines together. We're going to check it by dragging it off. And it looks pretty good to me. Then we're going to Control Z. It's going to put it back into place. And now we can head to our Send menu and go through the steps again. So that is how you would work your way through these houses to create them using the Dxf files. Once all your pieces are cut, you'll want to head over to the assembly video, and I will show you how to pull it all together to create your 3D Christmas Advent houses. I'll see you over there.